Good evening and welcome to the October meeting of the Lamoille Democratic Committee. Tonight we're going to hear a legislative update on the recently concluded legislative session from our representatives. And then we'll get a campaign update from two of our newer candidates as to how their campaign is going. We will also hear from Ms. Marissa Ovis about ways that people can get involved in the campaign and help out and elect Democrats up and down the ticket. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dave Iacovone from Morristown to kick off our review of the recently concluded legislative session. Dave?
You see it okay?
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, everybody. I'll be very brief, but hopefully informative. I'm on the Appropriations Committee with obviously the state budget. The good news for all of you as taxpayers is that we were able to balance our budget without significant, which I'll go into them, without significant reductions, without any taxes increases. There are taxes, but they're not increased. And we also have roughly 220 million in what we call our reserve funds. Sometimes they're called rainy day funds, caseload reserve funds, but set aside. We're one of the better states in the country that have been disciplined to do that. We budgeted removing fund dollars of that to help undocumented folks who've come to Vermont who the federal government specifically restricted from getting any stimulus checks. So we said if you are undocumented and you were here during a certain period, you're eligible for the $1,200 in relief, and there's a system set up to supply that. I do not think the full $5 million will be spent. Many of the folks who have come to our country experiencing trauma, fear of government, ICE, etc., are probably loath to step forward to a government agency for relief. Unfortunately, it may have an effect of suppressing their application for help. But if they do turn out in the numbers that are estimated, it could be $5 million, and we're meeting those funds out of what's called the caseload reserve. But in total, we'll have over $200 million available in our reserve fund. The reason that's significant is because in balancing our roughly $7 billion budget, which is comprised of state federal tax dollars and federal dollars and fees, we project next year at this time, which means it'll change, so it's a moving estimate, roughly $104 million deficit for next year. If we don't receive any federal, we expect that we will, we would have to fill that hole entirely on our own, either through reductions, tax increases, or using reserve funds. It's speculation, and I won't go on too long, but who we elect for president, I think, matters greatly in terms of going forward regarding the kind of relief that state and local governments will get in the future. We're counting on that, but we have no way of knowing for sure. I mentioned that there were some reductions in the budget. The governor had initially planned on across the board 5% cuts, but the revenues, including those from the federal government, were stronger than what were anticipated. So he did essentially, not completely, but a 3% cut out of operating budgets across the board, which helped us achieve some savings. But we did not eliminate or decrease any programs that especially vulnerable Vermonters count on. They were all a steady state, essentially level funded budget. So that's a good thing. Programs maintained, no new tax increase, reserve funds almost entirely still intact. Next year could be a problem. We just won't know. And I'll touch a little bit on what are called the CRF funds, the COVA relief funds. Vermont, as many of you may have heard, received slightly more than $1.2 billion. It has to be spent by December 30th, or it goes back to the federal government. We set up some language in the budget that said, if there's leftover money that's not spent, though we will try to spend it all, in the month of December, those unspent dollars will revert to our unemployment insurance fund and help bolster our UI, unemployment insurance trust fund, so that it continues to be strong going forward, and it is holding up reasonably well. The dollars, everything, the federal dollars, everything from the agricultural industry, the tourism industry, private colleges, public colleges, certainly the state colleges, across the board, investments being made, broadband, housing, over 30 million to address homelessness, I believe. Many different investments, over 100 million in total for businesses, including sole proprietors, to apply for help, to help them through the economic turmoil and chaos that COVID has caused. It's far-reaching. I'd be glad offline to go into detail with anybody. Just send me an email or call me, whatever. 730-0483, 730-0483 is my cell. If anybody has any specific questions on certain projects or activity that we undertook. So we ended up much better than we thought we were going to. Thanks greatly to Senator Leahy, who instituted what's called a small state minimum. Vermont received almost the most per capita, if not the most, federal assistance than any other state. That helped us in a powerful way, though it's one-time money. So the future is cloudy, but we're optimistic. Bruce, I'll stop there because I promised Avram, and he never forgets this stuff, that I would be brief so that he could go next.
Okay, Avram. Avram Pat is from Worcester and part of the Morristown, Elmore, Worcester district. Avram?
And Woodbury.
And Woodbury, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll start by saying that obviously our legislative session, after we initially recessed back in March from actually meeting at the State House, was a very strange and difficult process that, as you know, was done in stages. We did some, then we recessed again, then we met again starting in the beginning of August, all remotely on Zoom. And as difficult and as that was, I do think that it's truly remarkable that we pulled it off. There are a lot of people to thank for that. I can't tell you how many times during these sessions that the speaker had to tell a member of the House, of the 150 members of the House who was trying to speak, that they needed to unmute themselves. I think the number would be over 1,000 by the time we were done. I really do. And it could probably be counted through some kind of a technical audio check of that. But in terms of the COVID relief funds, as you know, it sort of came in stages and waves, and we had to apportion it out for different necessary purposes. And in some of the first rounds, there were gaps or omissions, and we had to go back and correct some of those. I just think we did a really remarkable job. And I do want to say, even though this is a partisan political meeting, that it amazes me how many of the votes on these things were overwhelming majorities. And that's something that we still can do in Vermont, because we do talk to each other despite differences and despite debates. And when it comes down to a vote, with some exceptions, a really overwhelming majority voted for all of these relief items. And we were all of the House members were involved in that in a general way. So I was hearing from small business owners, self-employed small business owners, who were among the groups that were at various times not included or not well included in how the programs were originally designed. That's not my committee area. It's not my main focus of attention in the House because of that. But we were all hearing from constituents about things like that and trying to fix it either individually for them or to get this corrected in further legislation. In terms of my own committee, which is the Energy and Technology Committee, we gave our input, as all committees did, to the Appropriations Committee, dealt with changes that the Senate was proposing to our sections of this. For the largest part of what our committee was dealing with was broadband. And as you know, we were restricted in using these funds, that it had to be related to the COVID-19 emergency, and it had to be spent by the end of the year, as Dave said. So a lot of the broadband funding that we recommended and that in one form or another eventually passed was very limited to getting people hooked up now, even if it was not necessarily the best long-term alternative for them, so that they could do their work at home or go to school at home, or in many cases, families that I heard from, both. You had two working parents and two working kids all trying to Zoom at the same time. And if you live on a back road in any of the towns in this district, that's going to be a problem, as I think some of you know. So we did some short-term connectivity issues, financial aid for people who can't afford it. We also did on the energy side, help for people paying off delinquencies in their electric bills, because one of these days the moratorium on shutoffs is going to end, and there are going to be a lot of people who lose power if they can't then or before that get back on track with their utility. And in the meantime, it's hurting the utilities, which then affects everybody's rates, all of our rates. The single biggest thing I think we did in terms of the broadband thing was two streams of funding of, if I'm remembering right, $1.5 million each for the communications union districts, recognizing that they are in different stages of development. There are a couple that are well along in their development, and there are some, just like the Lamoille district that just formed, that need money, grant money basically, for study and research and business development planning. Whereas the Central Vermont district that Worcester is part of, but Elmore also is much further along, because it started two or more years ago. And they're ready to start borrowing money to actually start running fiber on some back roads in our, I think, 20 towns in the district. And in order to do that, we had previously set up for the first time VETA loan financing for this, but they need a down payment, at least at the beginning, before revenue starts coming in. So for those districts that are a little bit further along, the funding is available as a down payment on a VETA loan to actually start hooking people up. So I think I'll stop there. And I'm going to say one more thing. The Global Warming Solutions Act, which our committee did most of the work on in the House, as you know, passed overwhelmingly in both bodies. The Senate sent it back to the House with very little change. The governor vetoed it. We overrode the veto. There is an awful lot of misinformation, I'm going to say deliberate disinformation, about what is and is not in that bill, which is very unfortunate. And having worked on it, it's very personally upsetting. If anyone is interested, I have some plain English summary sheets about what the bill does and does not do that specifically addresses what some people, including the opponents that are running against Dave and me, are saying about that bill. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you, Avram. You know, if you have that on an email, I would certainly appreciate that summary of the Global Solutions Act.
I will.
Global Climate Solutions Act.
I'm about to get off line, but I will email it to you before I go eat supper.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay. Next up is Dan Noyes from Wolcott. Dan represents Belvedere, Hyde Park, Johnson, and Wolcott. Okay, take it away, Dan.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. Appreciate it. So yeah, I mean, going back was definitely interesting. It was a lot of work, a lot going on, trying to balance everything that happens for my other job in this time of year also. So, but it was definitely some good work. One of the things that I'm really proud of is that the Older Vermonters Act passed both the House and the Senate, and it was sent to the governor on the 30th. So waiting to hear if he signs that. And I've talked about it 100 times to folks, and it's been a 2-year project. So glad to see that moving on to the next steps. You know, in a nutshell, basically, it's if we're going to be the oldest state, we might as well be the best state to age in. So it really looks at a bill of rights for older Vermonters, how we make sure that the agencies that provide services to older Vermonters are adequately compensated, and to make sure that self-neglect, we look at how we handle self-neglect in this state. So it really is kind of a big picture overview of how we make Vermont the best state to age in. And I'm really looking forward to some of the long-term planning goals that we set forth in there and the plans, and seeing those happen, and then the next come out of that legislation, the next step. So be much longer. I mean, he got the bill on the 30th. I believe he would have to sign it by Wednesday or Thursday in order for it to move forward. One of the things we really talked a lot about in committee was justice-involved youth. As you know, Woodside Juvenile Detention has been basically shut down by the new commissioner, Sean Brown. It's had a long history of problems with how the youth are treated, how it's funded. It's really been a lot of contentious work over the years for how we have that type of facility in Vermont, and how we really look at how these youth are cared for, and how they transition to adulthood and don't end up in Mississippi or someplace else where it's not in the best interest of anybody in our society. So we looked at their next steps and how they're going to care for these folks, get them the services that they need that are justice involved, and how DCF is going to work with an outside contractor. What does that look like? It's going to be discussion moving forward, but I'm pretty happy with how Sean Brown, the new commissioner of DCF, is handling this, and very impressed. So there's a company called Beckett out of New Hampshire that we're going to be partnering with, and we did have a lot of discussion about it, you know, especially around COVID and how these people are cared for in an institutional setting where you can have issues with COVID. Along that same, with DCF, we had a lot of talk about childcare and how they're reopening, how they're making sure that they're compensated for the supplies they need to be safe, and how the children can be safe, and also looking at hubs where we have places where children can go when there's not the facilities in their areas to be able to provide, based on the fact that some of the schools are only open part-time. And then we also looked at changing some of the rules around what is eligible for childcare financial assistance. When schools are in session, there was some significant laws that say you can't receive financial help if the schools are open. So we had to change some of that. That was in our committee. And then We also had some discussion around nursing home transfers with the Department of Disabilities, Aging and Independent Living. There's a number of nursing homes that are going to be sold in the future. And we want to make sure that those transactions happen and that the people that live there and rely on their care are not pushed to the side, and make sure that they're adequately cared for when these transitions happen. And what does that look like? Because technically in Vermont, there was not a lot of oversight. And so that will be a continuing discussion when we move into the next session, about, and in the past, as you know, up in Franklin County, there was a real estate investment trust, or REIT, that bought up a bunch of nursing homes and residential care facilities and kind of disassembled them and sold the pieces off for maximum profit. And, that is a big concern of mine, that we make sure that the folks that enter into these facilities are protected, and that doesn't happen to them. So, but one thing I definitely want to give a shout out to is Representative Iacovone and his work on the budget, especially around the state colleges. It's just awesome that we were able to really pull that together and make sure that our state college system had the adequate funding that we needed. And it was really interesting the way that was accomplished. I don't know if a lot of people know, but we were able to backfill some of the general fund dollars, actually about $23 million, with COVID relief money to the Department of Health and the Department of Public Safety, which freed up money that we could use to move the state college through this pandemic. And really, it was in a pretty dire spot, and the Appropriations Committee really, it's amazing that they were able to make that happen. So kudos, thank you for making that. I only got to vote on it. Wish I'd come up with the idea. Very brilliant. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. If someone has any questions or wants to talk to me about some of the work that we did in the Human Services Committee, welcome to give me a call. I'll give you my number. It's 730-7171. So thank you.
Hey, thank you, Dan. Does anybody have any questions for either Dan or Dave? Okay, well, I don't see any. All right, well, let's go to the candidate update then. Joe Sable Courtney is running in Stowe for the Lamoille 1 district. Joe, you want to give us an update?
Sure.
How things are going?
Did Kate want to go first because she has to go, or? Kate, you good?
Kate, you
It's
wanna go?
okay. It's okay. Go ahead.
All right. What kind of information would you like, Bruce? What our plans are,
Well-
what we're doing, what?
Well, yeah, how are things going for you?
Mailings are going out. Everything is in the, this is the crunch time. This is volunteers make the calls. This is the time. And talking to voters, all of our votes dropped last week. It's great to know somebody in the post office, and good old Bill will tell you they dropped, Joe. So they're there. They're in people's hands, and so. My phone calls are still informational, and it's great to talk to people. Some people are going to vote in person. I'm hearing a lot of that, but I say only if you feel safe. So people want a sense of community when they're going to the ballot box this year, more than they're voting. So we have our mailings in the pipeline. We've had an event last week. We're doing honkin' waves. Oh gosh, Front Porch Forum ad. We have a full page ad that we're going to be doing. Donna Carpenter has purchased. So Donna has paid for that. If you don't know Donna Carpenter, she's Burton Snowboards, and she's a supporter. So that will have, the content will be the endorsements that we've gotten, most notably from the entire congressional delegation, Sanders, Leahy, and Welsh. So Bill McKibben and Ben and Jerry too. So yeah, I guess that's probably about it. We're just surging forward and all hands on deck. And, I think, once the ballots are, well, we're also getting information on the ballots that our data guru, David Oppenheimer, has been building lists for us, working with Spencer and VDP to build a list of people who have received their ballots, and we need to call. We also are going to be doing a mailing to folks who are new registrants, new voter registrants. And we just put that order for that postcard in today. So there are about 240, 250 of those. So we'll be hand addressing those and saying, hey, yo, welcome. So that's pretty much it. Thanks.
Thank you. Kate? Kate Donnelly is running in Lamoille too. She's from Hyde Park, and she's running the same district with Dan, which stretches from Belvedere, Johnson, Hyde Park, and Wolcott. Kate? How are things
Correct. Things are going well. Yeah, I wanted to take a moment and thank all the current incumbents on the call and Abram who jumped off. I just, being in close proximity to folks who were in session during this stretch has been a wild experience just looking on. The amount of work that you guys have had to put in is pretty mind-blowing, trying to juggle jobs and life and everything else. So thank you guys for everything that you've done. It's, this has been a really interesting campaign, certainly for it to be my first campaigning in a pandemic is a strange experience. I feel sort of like a broken record. I think I've said this a number of times to many people, but I think if we were going door to door, we'd have a good finger on the pulse of the broader community. And, since we're not doing that, sort of campaigning in a bubble, and I can say that our bubble is great. Like there's a lot of really supportive people, but it's hard to know if that translates into the broader community, So we're just sort of doing everything that we can. I can say it's been a pleasure to campaign alongside Dan. We get to spend lots of hours together at the local dump and meet and greets on the side of the road and honking waves. And there's few people who can make 4 hours of meet and greets and Saturday morning Johnson dump trips entertaining and educational, but Dan's a great running mate, and so I've learned a lot in the process. Grateful to him. So yeah, I think it's been an intense trip. I feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel here. I think we're doing everything we can, and have the debate coming up on Wednesday for anyone who's interested. It'll be live streamed on Facebook, I believe, through the News and Citizen. And again, just grateful to have some really great Democratic candidates in the area. We all connected last night and were able to talk through that a bit. And so just, I think in this moment, again, just feeling gratitude for the community of people up here, and being able to have access to that. That's been a really beautiful thing in my experience, is just connecting with these resources locally. There's some really great people, great folks doing work up here. And so that's probably been the highlight for me of the campaign so far, in addition to, of course, just connecting with the community in such a meaningful way. So I think that's about it, unless anyone has any questions.
I've got one quick question. What time is the debate going to be live streamed?
So I believe they're doing it Wednesday and Thursday. They're doing, each night they'll do one of the 2-seat districts and one of the 1-seat districts. And so the first night, Wednesday, Lamoille 2, so the district for Dan and I, will be first, I believe, from 6 to 7:30. And then I think Lucy's district goes after us. So I think that's at 7:30. And then Thursday will be Joe and Abram and Dave. Sorry, what?
Okay.
What's that?
That's right. Okay. Any questions for our two new candidates?
I just wanted to say thanks. I just want to say thanks to these guys too, because thank you, Kate, for just bringing that up, because we had a fun time last night. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Dan. And such a wealth of information that, as I told them, my mind is exploding with information. They helped me to hone in on it, and some follow-up today, thanks to Kate and all of them, that we have some information that just kind of sets into your soul. And so, that you kind of got this. Marina, did you hear that? I actually said that. I got this. So yeah, so I think that I think we're going to be good. I think we're going to be good on Thursday. So thanks, you guys.
I just would ask all the candidates, whether they're incumbents or new candidates, is there any particular issue that you're hearing from voters today that really seems to be on their mind? Anybody want to take that?
Not being able to canvas, I think it makes it really hard to hear that. And when you make phone calls, phone banking, you're basically leaving messages. I mean, today I made 20 calls an hour ago and I got 4 conversations. So, and people they don't want to hang around and talk about, when I do hear something, I hear get Trump out. That's what I hear. But I don't hear people bringing up much else.
Well, we're certainly working on that, and I think we're going to be successful. Anybody else? Kate, did you want to say something?
Sorry, you were asking like sort of themes or things that people have brought up.
What are you hearing from the voters out there?
Dan can jump in too. I mean, I think that there's a lot of discussion of the Global Warming Solutions Act. Act 250 comes up. Certainly strong contingents whose sort of primary like voting topic is Second Amendment rights and gun rights. And then in sort of closer circles to me, what a lot of people are talking about is the impact of the financial impact and sort of the emotional stress impact of COVID on parents of school-age children. I would say those are the big ones that sort of stand out to me. I don't know, Dan, if you have others that.
I think people are very concerned that have children about the schools and how their ability to get an education and be safe while doing so, and amazing work that our teachers have been doing in the community. That's come up also around childcare and access to childcare as we, a lot of folks are going to work every day and making sure that their children are safe. And then also just getting to the other side of this, what is it going to look like? What's our economy going to look like? Are we going to, still have a lot of these small businesses that are really under a lot of stress? But yeah, I think that's pretty much what we're hearing and really trying to look forward and figure out, what we can do collectively when we get back to Montpelier in January to make sure people are helped and not forgotten, and looking at making sure they have access to healthcare if their job has changed and yeah, all kinds of stuff, as Kate said.
Okay. Anyone else? Comments?
I can briefly, if I may, Bruce.
Sure, Dave.
On Front Porch, in my campaign, on Front Porch Forum, the folks running as Republicans both invoked the Global Warming Solutions Act as being a bad bill. And I'm trying to say this in a positive way. The information they shared was not the information that to me is accurate. Things like, goodness gracious, if this bill passed, we may not be able to have barbecues in our backyard, or Thunder Road could be closed. Things that the bill, I don't mean to laugh because I want to be respectful, but the bill doesn't do that. And what I was pleased with is the outpouring is too strong a word, but the fairly fair number of really thoughtful people who said, wait a minute, that's not how I read the bill, and climate change is important. That was reassuring to me because you never know. On another issue, one of the folks who's running as a Republican invoked the phrase, take back Vermont. And regardless how she may have intended to use it, there was, again, outpouring may be too strong, but perhaps not, a number of people who said, it's not the Vermont we know, it's not appropriate, it's divisive. A couple of people said, hey, it's unfair, that was never meant that way, and you shouldn't be critical. the reason I raise it is because there were far more people who said there's no place for hate and divisiveness. That made me feel good to see that. I sat back, I just watched it occur. So I mentioned those two things because one, information that we might question, and one, whether intended or not, clearly was divisive to some people, and the response was heartening. I don't know if there'll be more of that, but it will be what it will be. So aside from that, I can't say as though there's been any other themes that I have heard emerging.
Okay. Yeah, I think that woman who said we want to take back Vermont, she really stirred up a hornet's nest from what I saw on Front Porch Forum. And I was very heartened the way people responded to that, because there's an implied kind of Trump message of like, we're going to keep new people out. I don't know if I want to say it's racist, but it's homophobic for sure. And it's not what we want Vermont to go, and where most Vermonters want our state to go. So I agree with you on that. Anybody else? Well, if there is none, then let's hear from Marissa Lovis, who is our, I keep mispronouncing her last name, and I hope she'll forgive me for that. But Marissa,
I will. I definitely will.
Is our Vermont Democratic Party organizer for Lamoille County in the Northeast Kingdom, and is responsible for coordinating volunteer activity. So Marissa, can you give us up to date about what people can do to volunteer and what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that kind introduction. You got it almost correct, my last name. It sounds like there's a Z at the end, I think, but I've never met anyone else with my last name, so really it's up for interpretation. But right now, so the big things that we're working on are making phone calls and also doing literature drops. So we just found out that Bernie Sanders sponsored 40,000 like one-page kind of advertisements for statewide candidates. And so what we're going to do is there are 3 different towns where we're going to distribute those. And I can read them right now. There are Newport, Stowe, and St. Johnsbury. And so essentially what that will look like is we will get all of those documents from the Montpelier office. And then during this weekend, there will be 2 different shifts where volunteers will get a list of addresses in a certain section, and they will distribute that information. And so we can also work with local candidates. So if you are going to distribute, postcards or anything like that, you can also do it at the same time and talk to folks, but we're doing kind of no low contact drop-offs of that information. So we're looking for volunteers to do that. There's someone who, Bruce, the woman that you sent me over, Molly, she is going to pick up that from Montpelier and distribute it. So we definitely need volunteers. And I will send more information over about that. But the hope is for doing it this weekend and collaborating with local candidates to make sure that their information is also getting sent out as well, and to the most targeted audiences as well, using the data that we've collected for, the past little while.
Okay. And you're doing phone banking? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we are in a big need for phone banking. And so right now we're focusing on Get Out the Vote, where essentially we are working with people to make a plan to vote if they haven't already. The phone banks automatically take out people who, when their vote is processed, they're taken out of the system. So they are all up to date. And if someone kind of just dropped off their ballot in the mail, we'll make a plan with them to make sure that they follow up with their local registrar and make sure that their vote was cast and counted, and make sure that any discrepancies are taken care of. Because, with this in this day and age of voter suppression, we cannot count on, things going as smoothly as we'd like them to. So that is a lot of the calling that we're doing. We're doing identification for Joe, especially with her scripts. And yeah, so that is what we're working on. We need a ton of phone bankers, not only to work with Joe's campaign specifically, but also in statewide, to make sure that everyone up and down the ballot is supported on the Democratic Party.
Great. That's really important work. That's how we get people elected. A lot of that just groundwork needs to be done, particularly for new candidates. Does anybody have any questions for Marissa?
What's happening with the Biden-Harris signs?
Well, I can
So,
probably,
yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
well, we've ordered them. They're on their way, and they're supposed to get to the Montpelier office on Wednesday. And then I don't know, Marissa, are you going to go down and pick them up, and then we can distribute them from there?
I am currently in Maine right now, but I am probably going to drive back to, yes.
Because you've been in Glover, I know that.
Yes, I've been in Glover, and I'm currently in Maine because, as we all know, the broadband is not great for remote work, and there's not a lot of work in the Northeast Kingdom. So, I'm the poster child for someone who wanted to move to Vermont, but needed those resources, and bring people in. But anyways, so I'm trying to find a place to live in Portland, Maine. So if anyone wants to offer me a job in Vermont and a house, feel free. But anyways,
So you want internet, so okay.
I do want internet. That is definitely important.
That's a big ask. Yes.
Or at least a job, I'm not picky. But anyways, so yeah, I'm hopefully going to go pick them up. If not, I will find a volunteer to do that as well, or coordinate with anyone who is able. I think, there are people in all four counties that I quote unquote represent. So I'm going to try to find some centralized location that is somehow close to Essex and also Caledonia and also Lamoille County. So we'll see how that goes.
Marissa, I'll call you tomorrow. We'll work that out.
Okay, perfect. We'll talk tomorrow.
Yeah. Any other questions? Right. Well, thank you, Marissa. We really appreciate the good work that you're doing.
Anytime.
This will conclude our broadcast segment of the meeting, and we're now going to go into the business meeting. So thank you, everyone who's been watching.